My name is Adam Parrott, and I've been organizing with 911truth.org for the last couple of years. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Dr. Richard B. Lee. He's a University Professor Emeritus of Anthropology at the University of Toronto, and he holds a cross appointment at the Center for International Health and is a fellow of the New College. He has held academic appointments at Harvard, Rutgers, and Columbia Universities, and research positions at Stanford, Australian National University, and Kyoto University. He is internationally known for his ethnographic studies, starting in 1963, of hunting and gathering societies. He has published 6 books and over 100 articles and chapters. A Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada and past President of the Canadian Anthropology Society, Lee holds honorary doctorates from the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, and Guelph University for his research and advocacy on behalf of Indigenous peoples. So would you please give a warm welcome to Dr. Richard B. Lee.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you to all of you for coming out on an evening when there's, here in Toronto, there's interesting other events of a similar nature going on elsewhere. So I'd like to introduce now Professor Michael Keefer of the University of Guelph. He's a professor of English and former president of the Association of Canadian College and University Teachers of English. He's published widely on questions of textual evidence in early modern literature and philosophy, as well as such intriguing questions that are relevant to tonight's proceedings as contemporary electoral fraud in U.S. presidential elections, Canada's role in Haiti in the troubles in that benighted country, and finally his work on Canada's role in the war on terror. And I understand that that is the direction that Professor Michael Keefer will take us this evening. Welcome to Toronto.
I'm honored to be sharing a platform with the distinguished economist, Professor Paul Zarembka. And I'd also like to thank Professor Richard B. Lee, our host at this event, for making it possible. Now, a brief reflection on the career of Professor Lee can provide us with an appropriate point of entry to the topic I'm addressing this evening: Canada's role in the war on terror. Richard Lee is an emeritus university professor at the University of Toronto, a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, a foreign honorary member of the American Academy of Science, and, as you've already heard, an anthropologist of worldwide distinction. He's also, and this has been an integral part of his anthropological research and scholarship, a committed public intellectual. Consider the title of a book he co-edited more than 30 years ago: The New Native Resistance, Indigenous Peoples' Struggle, and here's the part of the subtitle that I think is interesting, particularly interesting, and the Responsibility of Scholars. The New Native Resistance, Indigenous Peoples' Struggle, and the Responsibility of Scholars. Or the title of one of his many articles, Colonialism, Apartheid, and Liberation, or the very appropriate title chosen in 2003 by the editor of a Festschrift, a collection of essays published in Professor Lee's honor, The Politics of Egalitarianism, Theory and Practice. In his decades of work in support of the politics of egalitarianism, Richard Lee has been a staunch defender of human rights, and in particular the rights of indigenous peoples. He's been active in HIV/AIDS research and advocacy, and as I think you've already heard, in 2005 he became the first academic in this country to devote a university course to close skeptical analysis of the evidence relating to the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. I'm going to write something on the board here. That looks like It is Greek. That's the English transliteration of the word. The Greeks of the age of Pericles had a name for the kind of outspokenness that we see in Professor Lee's career, which they regarded as a crucial and defining feature of their democracy. They called it parrhesia, a word that's sometimes translated as meaning free speech. But as the French philosopher Michel Foucault demonstrated in a series of lectures devoted to exploring the classical origins of what he called fearless speech, parrhesia carries further meanings as well. It is speech for which the speaker takes full responsibility, vouching for the truth of its content. And there's a verb, a related verb, parrhesia zesthai, which means to tell the truth. This speech arises out of a sense of duty, of responsibility to the good of others and oneself, and it entails the very clear risk that the political authorities or the democratic majority to whom this speech is addressed may react with anger and with punitive measures against the parrhesiastes, the citizen who has dared to speak truth to their power. So what does Richard Lee's example lead us to? A recognition, I would suggest, that the forthright public presentation of what may be unwelcome or unpalatable truths is no less crucial a function in our own society than it was in the democracy that flourished in Athens nearly 2.5 millennia ago. And a recognition as well that it is the particular responsibility of scholars, as people who have devoted their lives to research, to critical inquiry, to an endless refinement of its methods and protocols, in short, to the sifting out of truth, that it is the particular responsibility of scholars to exercise this essential function of skeptically seeking out truth and, whatever the risks, of speaking truth to power, when necessary, of speaking truth against power, and perhaps above all, of speaking truth to and on behalf of the victims of power. Now, we might want to expect our journalists to do this job. As I think we all recognize, it's an unfortunate fact that today's corporate media have very largely dispensed with investigative journalism. Now, I want to point to a recent column by Jonathan Kay, October 27th, 2008, in the National Post, which contains what I think is an admirably frank admission of the predicament faced by pundits in the media who are asked to speak out on subject after subject after subject and are not given the time, or perhaps don't have the inclination, to inform themselves adequately on the subjects on which they're asked by their employers to exercise expertise. Now, what prompted this, I think, admirably frank admission is a recognition that the responses to his own, in his words, purely instinctive dismissals of 9/11 skepticism as, quote, complete nonsense, were coming from people, a large proportion of whom were calm, rational, and conspicuously much better informed on the subject than he himself was. I think that's an interesting admission, and I would add that it comes from a journalist who, a month previously, had written what I regard as a very fine piece on the Omar Khadr case, saying, here are the facts, which he had researched, here are the ethics, and here's what our government should be doing about the shameful fact of a child, possibly a child soldier, but still a child, arrested, tortured, and on trial for his life before a kangaroo court. Now, of course, there have been reasons